Birth and childhood, 1767 to 1778. John Quincy Adams was born on July 11, 1767, in Braintree, Massachusetts, a town destined to give America not just one, but two presidents. He was the son of John Adams, a brilliant lawyer who would become America's second president, and Abigail Adams, one of the most educated and politically conscious women of her time. From his earliest days, John Quincy's life was shaped by revolution. As a child, he watched his father leave home for months at a time to attend the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. At just 7 years old, he witnessed the Battle of Bunker Hill, watching smoke rise over Charlestown. War was not just history in his books, it was happening outside his window. His mother, Abigail, played a powerful role in his upbringing. She instilled in him discipline, a passion for knowledge, and a strong moral compass. She encouraged his reading and writing, making sure her son would never grow intellectually lazy. By the time he was 10, John Quincy had already translated parts of Latin and Greek, studied French, and begun keeping a diary, a habit he would continue for over 70 years, leaving behind one of the most detailed personal records in American history. Education and youth, 1778 to 1790. In 1778, at just 10 years old, John Quincy Adams accompanied his father on a diplomatic mission to France during the Revolutionary War. Most children of his age played in fields or studied near home. John Quincy sailed across the Atlantic during a war, endured storms, and faced British naval threats. In Europe, he met Benjamin Franklin and traveled to the Netherlands, where he attended schools in Amsterdam and Leiden. His intellect and maturity made him stand out. He quickly became fluent in French and Dutch, and soon began serving as a secretary and translator during diplomatic missions, all before the age of 15. Returning briefly to America, John Quincy enrolled at Harvard College and graduated in 1787, at the age of 20 with high honors. Though he was the son of a powerful politician, he never relied on privilege. He studied hard and earned his reputation as a man of substance. Following Harvard, he studied law under Theophilus Parsons in Newburyport and passed the bar. But his passion wasn't just law, it was public service. He felt a calling to serve the young republic that his father and others had fought to build. Marriage and family life, 1790 to 1809. In 1794, while serving as a diplomat in the Netherlands, John Quincy Adams met Louisa Catherine Johnson, the daughter of the American consul in London. She was refined, witty, and intelligent, a perfect match for a man as intense and intellectual as Adams. Their courtship wasn't simple. John Quincy's mother, Abigail, was skeptical about Louisa being foreign-born. Nevertheless, love prevailed, and the couple married in 1797. Louisa would become the only First Lady born outside the United States until Melania Trump. Their marriage was filled with deep affection but not without hardship. The couple suffered the loss of several children, and Louisa endured long periods of separation due to Adams' political duties. But she stood by him through it all, from his days as a diplomat to the bitter struggles in Congress decades later. John Quincy and Louisa had 4 children, though only one, Charles Francis Adams, would survive to carry on the Adams legacy. Like his father and grandfather, Charles would also become a diplomat and serve as U.S. Minister to Britain during the Civil War. The rise in American politics, 1790 to 1801. John Quincy Adams entered the political world not through his father's influence, but through his own merit. In 1794, President George Washington appointed him as minister to the Netherlands, impressed by his intelligence and diplomatic skill. Adams, at just 27, already displayed the calm judgment and sharp mind of a seasoned statesman. He quickly built a reputation as a fearless voice of principle. During his time in Europe, he was also appointed minister to Prussia, and in 1797, he negotiated a crucial commercial treaty that secured better trade for American merchants. In 1802, he was elected to the Massachusetts State Senate, and just a year later, he moved to the U.S. Senate as a Federalist. But Adams was not the kind of man who towed the party line. He often supported legislation proposed by Thomas Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, angering his own party. When he voted in favor of Jefferson's Embargo Act, a deeply unpopular policy in New England, he was ostracized by Federalist leaders. Eventually, he resigned from the Senate in 1808, leaving behind a trail of both criticism and admiration. To Adams, personal conviction always came before party loyalty. Master of Diplomacy in Europe, 1809 to 1817. John Quincy Adams' next chapter would take him back across the Atlantic. In 1809, President James Madison appointed him as minister to Russia, making him the first official U.S. representative to the Russian court. In St. Petersburg, Adams became close with Tsar Alexander I, and during the War of 1812, he played a crucial role in keeping Russian-American relations peaceful. Adams' diplomacy kept European powers from exploiting America's internal conflict and helped maintain trade routes during the war. But his most vital diplomatic mission came in 1814, when he led the American delegation in Ghent, Belgium, to negotiate the treaty that would end the War of 1812. Alongside Henry Clay and Albert Gallatin, Adams was firm yet strategic, refusing to accept British terms that would humiliate the young republic. The Treaty of Ghent, signed in December 1814, restored peace without territorial loss, a major victory for America. Adams later remarked, "Nothing was adjusted, but everything was saved." Following this, he served as minister to Britain, where he smoothed relations between the two nations and prepared the groundwork for lasting peace. Secretary of State and the Monroe Doctrine, 1817 to 1825. In 1817, under President James Monroe, John Quincy Adams was appointed as Secretary of State, a position many saw as the stepping stone to the presidency. It was here that Adams would leave one of the most enduring marks in American foreign policy history. His most significant achievement was crafting the foundation for what would become the Monroe Doctrine. While the Declaration would carry President Monroe's name, the philosophy and logic behind it were deeply rooted in Adams' thinking. In a time when European powers threatened to recolonize Latin America, Adams argued that the Western Hemisphere should be off-limits to European interference. His statement, "America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy," reflected his belief in independence without entanglement. He also secured the Adams-Onis Treaty in 1819, acquiring Florida from Spain and settling the western boundary of the U.S., stretching all the way to the Pacific Ocean. This was a diplomatic masterstroke, expanding the nation's reach without war. By 1824, Adams had elevated the role of Secretary of State to one of unmatched prestige. Many considered him the most qualified man in America to become the next president. The tumultuous presidency, 1825 to 1829. In 1824, John Quincy Adams faced one of the most controversial elections in American history. For major candidates, Andrew Jackson, Henry Clay, William Crawford, and Adams himself ran for president. Though Jackson won the most electoral and popular votes, he failed to secure a majority. The decision went to the House of Representatives. Behind closed doors, Henry Clay, the Speaker of the House, threw his support to Adams. In return, Adams appointed Clay as his Secretary of State, a move critics labeled the corrupt bargain. Though legal, the optics were damning. Andrew Jackson's supporters erupted in fury, claiming Adams had stolen the presidency. Despite this cloud, Adams entered the White House determined to serve the nation with integrity. He envisioned a strong national infrastructure: roads, canals, observatories, and even a national university. His ideas were ahead of their time, but they faced fierce opposition from states' rights advocates and Jacksonians in Congress. Adams refused to use patronage or political favors to win support. He believed in meritocracy, not manipulation. As a result, his agenda stalled. His presidency was marred by constant opposition, and the public, swayed by Jacksonian populism, turned against him. By 1828, Andrew Jackson returned with vengeance, launching a brutal campaign that attacked Adams' character, family, and legacy. Adams, disheartened but not defeated, lost re-election and left office in 1829. Quiet years and internal struggles, 1829 to 1830. After leaving the presidency, Adams returned to his home in Quincy, Massachusetts. For a man of such intellect and drive, retirement was stifling. He spent his time writing in his diary, studying astronomy and history, and quietly observing the country he had once helped lead. But all was not peaceful. Adams wrestled with bitterness about the nation's political direction. The rise of populism under Jackson disturbed him. He saw it as a threat to constitutional government and reasoned leadership. Personal loss also struck him. In 1829, his beloved brother Thomas Boylston Adams died, and Adams himself suffered recurring health issues. Yet the fire in him remained. He was not done serving his country. In 1830, an extraordinary event occurred. Despite being a former president, Adams ran for Congress and won. It was unprecedented. No other ex-president had ever done such a thing. Critics mocked him. Supporters celebrated him. Adams didn't care for either. He had work left to do. The Lion in the House, his legendary congressional years, 1831 to 1848. John Quincy Adams' years in Congress would become some of the most heroic and controversial of his life. Representing Massachusetts' 8th District, he became known as the Old Man Eloquent. His sharp mind, unmatched experience, and moral courage made him a formidable voice. His greatest cause? The abolition of slavery. At a time when speaking against slavery was political suicide, Adams stood firm. He repeatedly introduced anti-slavery petitions, infuriating Southern lawmakers. In 1836, Congress enacted the gag rule, which automatically tabled any petition about slavery. It was a direct attempt to silence Adams. But he fought back. For 8 years, he battled the gag rule, arguing that it violated the First Amendment. In 1844, he won. The gag rule was repealed, a personal triumph and a significant moment in the fight against slavery. He also defended the Amistad captives in 1841, African slaves who had rebelled aboard a Spanish ship. Adams argued their case before the Supreme Court, aged nearly 74. His powerful speech, grounded in human rights and justice, helped secure their freedom. Even in old age, Adams attended Congress daily. He read voraciously, debated fiercely, and never softened his convictions. For him, public service was not about popularity, it was about principle. Death on the floor of Congress, 1848. On February 21, 1848, John Quincy Adams was seated at his desk in the House of Representatives. The session was underway when Adams suddenly collapsed. Fellow congressmen rushed to his aid. He had suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage, a stroke. He was carried to the speaker's room, just off the House floor. For 2 days, he lay there unconscious, surrounded by friends and family. On February 23rd, John Quincy Adams breathed his last. His final words, whispered faintly, were, "This is the last of earth. I am content." He died in the very place where he had fought so passionately for liberty and justice. A fitting end for a man who had dedicated more than 50 years of his life to the service of his country. Congress paused to mourn. Even his rivals paid tribute to his courage and unwavering dedication. The entire nation felt the loss of one of its most principled and brilliant public servants. Legacy, a life of purpose, not popularity. John Quincy Adams was not loved by the masses during his presidency, but history has come to see him as a man far ahead of his time. He stood for science, education, and the expansion of knowledge. He believed in a country bound together by ideas, infrastructure, and justice. His vision of America was broad and bold, a land where liberty was not just a slogan, but a promise kept. His moral leadership in the fight against slavery inspired the abolitionist movement that would grow stronger after his death. His victory over the gag rule and his defense of the Amistad Africans were milestones in America's slow journey toward freedom for all. He also redefined public service. As a former president who returned to Congress, he proved that service to the nation does not end with a title. It continues with purpose. The voice of principle. John Quincy Adams was a complex man. A scholar, a diplomat, a president, and a warrior for justice. He didn't seek popularity. He didn't chase applause. He walked a lonelier path, the path of principle. He once wrote, "Duty is ours. Results are God's." This was the core of his life's philosophy. Whether he was battling European monarchs, standing against slavery, or writing in his diary under candlelight, Adams never abandoned what he believed was right. In today's world, where popularity often trumps purpose, Adams reminds us that integrity matters, that the truth is worth defending, that even in defeat, a voice of principle echoes through time. His tomb lies beside his father's, John Adams, in the United First Parish Church in Quincy. 2 presidents, 2 patriots, 1 legacy of service. The reluctant hero, John Quincy Adams was not a man of charisma or political charm, but he was a man of immense courage, brilliance, and commitment. A champion of justice when it was dangerous, a voice for reason when noise ruled the day, a servant of the people until his very last breath. He may not have been the most popular president, but in the end, he became something greater, a symbol of unshakable American conscience.